and patients themselves only see what Google says. They're like, oh, I get teeth in a day. I'm like, okay, well, teeth in a day can mean a whole lot of things, right?
Yeah.
People want immediacy in things nowadays, which I get, right? But if you lose a tooth, sometimes you got to wait a little bit. You got to be a little bit more patient. So, I've one day, like you said, maybe there's going to be a problem that's solved and everyone's going to get teeth in a day and we're going to regrow teeth from a study that's done in Japan, right? Or something crazy like that. And that's an exciting thing, but
Yeah.
it makes our jobs as manufacturers and suppliers and dentists and everything like that a little bit more challenging because there's immediacy in everything. And the dentists are going to also want everything they have immediately.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode here on Beyond the Operatory podcast, brought to you by the amazing team at Dental City. I'm your host, John Stamper, and we are going to continue our episodes having conversations with some of the great companies that Dental City works with. For those of you that subscribe to Beyond the Operatory, as you know, we have had guests kind of all over the board in regards to leadership individuals. We've had guests come on that are talking about kind of where the state of dentistry is, like financial conversations. But today we're going to have a conversation with one of the great companies that Dental City works with, and that's Pulpdent. And with a lot of the companies that we've also had the opportunity to have a clinician with us. So very excited to have Dr. Neville Hatfield with us today. And also from Pulpdent, we have Michael Jeffery. So gentlemen, how you doing?
Doing really well.
Great.
Can't complain.
Yeah.
It's a great
Awesome.
hot Friday afternoon. So
Yeah, I
summer's
love it.
here.
I love it. All
Thanks for
right.
having us,
So,
John.
so Dr. Hatfield, we'll kind of just set the stage, let everybody know a little bit about yourself. I know you practice in New Jersey. Kind of just talk a little bit about your practice, and then we'll hop over to Michael, and he can talk a little about what he does at Pulpdent.
Yeah, absolutely. So I work in a wonderful group practice here in northern New Jersey, kind of working with a variety of doctors from different ages and experiences. And I practice privately 5 days a week. I'm not someone who just kind of talks and talks for a living and talks about materials. I'm someone who lives and breathes dentistry every day. And my side hustle or side interest is always learning about dental products and materials. And in that space, I've kind of learned to get involved with companies like Pulpdent and really utilize them in my clinical practice and make my patients' experiences and the outcomes I have in chair side much better.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and Michael, I've been in dentistry for 21 years, not a dentist, but I learned early on with the first company that I worked with that materials dictate technique. And so I think, Neville, to your point, right? I mean, that's a big thing in a dental practice, making sure you know and understand that. So, Michael, I'd love to have you talk a little bit about what you do at Pulpdent and how you're helping practices.
Yeah, for sure. I'm Michael, the Director of Product and Strategy at Pulpdent. Basically, I am here to build great products. And, at the end of the day, I'm kind of sitting at the intersection of our research and development and the customer, including, you and Neville and even the patients. So I'm here trying to figure out what do we need to do in terms of materials innovation that's going to help solve real problems in the clinic and for the patients. And I think uniquely as a company, we are very much patient focused, and that's really where we're coming from with the bioactive technologies that we've developed.
Awesome. So, Dr. Hatfield, I know the discussion on materials that remineralize and are smart materials, has evolved. Where are we today with those concepts?
Yeah, so I guess bioactivity in the space of dentistry has been around, right? Because we are always talking about things all the way back to like DiCal, which is still a lot of people use that or trying to affect, sensitivity afterwards, or glass ionomers, which were kind of the heyday of bioactivity, right? And then we're kind of really evolving into bringing bioactivity and remineralization into the forefront in general with newer materials. Now, it's one of those things where when I look at products and things like that I use in my clinical practice, the basic part of it comes down to will it benefit the patient and does it make their experience better, right? And with that comes remineralization because when you talk about remineralization or fighting decay or anything like that, our biggest cause of restorative failure in dentistry nowadays is failure at the adhesive margin of our composites and or the margins of our indirect restorations. So focusing on products that help us a little bit more beyond what we have, because you're going to have resin cements that are just, passive, right? They're totally fine. They work great, They've been working great for many years. However, if we can just give our patients a little bit more boost at home to help them out, that's the name of the game in my book.
And then, Michael, I know that there are a lot of companies that are in the bioactive space. Could you talk a little bit about how Pulpdent fits into that lineup?
Yeah, and to kind of go off of what Neville was saying, the term bioactive has been kind of somewhat debated. I think it's been, used in different contexts. For example, in endodontics, it kind of means one thing, more related to reparative dentin formation. In restorative dentistry, it could be a whole host of different things, and of course, remineralization is at the forefront. But that definition, I think, has been being hotly debated and modified as we speak. I think if you talk to some of the scientists in the international community, such as the IADR, for example, they don't have a consensus, and I don't think clinicians or dentists have a real consensus. So there's a real gray area in this, right? I think then what that means is, we have to be leaders in the space, and we're going to continue to lead the space and innovate on these new dimensions. And there's been, more and more papers coming out that are talking about the need for materials, especially in adhesive dentistry or aesthetic dentistry. Like Neville said, they're aesthetic, they're great, but they're passive. They're not bio responsive or interactive in any way, and they're probably not really therapeutic in any way. And so, how do we bring the benefits to the patient, which often means solving some of those key issues that Neville brought up, like margin, um, you know, um, compromised margins and adhesive interface issues.
So, Neville, how do you fit these bioactive products into your practice?
So I think it's kind of going back to what really benefits our patients the most, because at the end of the day, we see our patients most often twice a year for a cleaning, right? And then we don't see them again for another 6 months. And then between those periods of time, a lot goes on in their life. They're eating, they're chewing, they're talking, they're, doing whatever they do at home, brushing, not brushing. And if our goal as is to clinicians and I guess companies is to benefit a patient the most, it's to think about ways that we can help them more, right? So when I talk about my practice focuses heavily on giving the patient the right material in the right situation. And that comes with a lot of responsibility for understanding your materials, right? Passivity in composites and passivity in cements is not really something that we want anymore. But, resin modified glass ionomer cements have some level of bioactivity, right? And my definition of bioactivity, I will say, is like any response or effect on living tissue. Our teeth are living tissue, our gums are living tissue, the biofilm that is in our mouths inherently, no matter how much Listerine you swish around with, right? That is living organisms. So if we can affect that and kind of make this instead of just putting something passive in the mouth, but instead have something that can fight that biofilm and then recharge and then fight it again and continuously do this. That is just the overall goal or mission I feel like nowadays in my practice because it just makes sense, right? I always want to do the best for my patient. I know that all dentists in general want to do what's best for their patient. And that's a responsibility that we have as clinicians. So I tend to choose products and materials in my lineup that have a bioactive component when it's available. And with that comes a lot of products from Pulpdent and also products from other companies too that might fit a niche a little bit better. So I think that's a really responsible thing to do as a clinician.
Well, Neville, as you know, I feel like, especially since COVID, I mean, you see this on a daily basis in your practice, that I feel like patients hopefully are connecting more and more the oral systemic link between our oral health and what goes on in our body.
Yeah.
There's more information out there. It doesn't always mean that they're bringing to you the right information, but I feel like they're at least more curious. And as you said, all they want to know is that when they get a restoration done, that it's going to succeed, right? It's not going to fail.
Yeah.
They don't always know all the behind the scenes technical things like that yourself and Michael are talking about, but to your point, they do want to know that that's important. And so how have you found a way to, I guess, kind of bring it down to their level to like they know and understand that you are using materials that are going to benefit the long-term health of their oral health without getting into all the science that all of us kind of geek out on.
That's a very good question. So I think it comes down to, well, one is patient selection when we talk about this, right? Because with treating patients in general, patient autonomy or the right for the patient to choose their own path and what their medical decisions are, dental decisions is totally up to them, right? Some patients, will right off the bat say, hey, I'm not really into fluoride and everything like that. We try and educate them, but I can talk until I'm blue in the face about all the benefits of fluoride and things like that. And I'm a very big believer in fluoride. But then it comes down to brass tacks of what the patient wants, right? So when I'm talking in general, I'm gonna, you know, first and foremost, 98%, 99% of my patients don't even think twice about anything additional that I'm giving them. But when every single time I do place a restoration that has bioactivity, I said, hey, I'm going to use a material that actually helps fight cavities for you, right? Or because 70% of restorations that we now place today are replacements for existing restorations, it's an easy concept of like, hey, we need a revision on this composite that was done a couple of years ago. You've got a cavity underneath where the glue layer was. I want to replace this and I want to replace it with something better. And that something better is going to help fight a new cavity from coming through. And it does that via, fluoride and phosphate of calcium, all sorts of different things that various materials have.
Well, and Michael, as Neville knows, one of the exciting things about having relationships with dental companies is that famous question in dentistry, which is what's new, what's next, right? Because companies like I know, like Pulpdent, are always bringing new things to the market. So I know you wanted to talk a little bit about a new bioactive that you are launching, and maybe kind of share some details on that.
Sure, yeah. We just launched ACTIVA Bulk Flow, which is the newest member of our ACTIVA patient treatment system. It really builds on the success of our best-selling flagship, which is ACTIVA Restorative. This is one where we really kind of optimize the flow to more of a low viscosity version. And our goal here is to provide clinicians with something that's different depending on the way they like to handle. For example, this one doesn't use a dispenser; it uses a simple plunger. So, and some clinicians really like the fact that it flows on its own and self-level, so to speak. We're really trying to continue to build out our patient treatment system to make there's certainly product segments out there that we don't cover right now, and I think are going to continue to benefit the patient as we release those products. So bulk flow is a great example of covering kind of a modality of use and also a preference for the clinician. And we have many more to come. So you could probably look at what we have and guess what is missing in a way pretty easily.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and I know the Dental City team will take any of the show notes from this episode, make sure that people can access that and learn that information. Dr. Hatfield, can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned this at the onset of our conversation, materials is something that you've always been very interested in, especially as it has evolved over time. So where do you see materials going? I think that's the first question. And then second part is, how has it changed since you got out of school?
Yeah. So first part is where I see they're going. I can tell you where they are. And materials right now are very close together with each other. Companies are coming out with amazing products. I'm going to talk composite dentistry, right? Because that's a lot of what we do. Composites are neck and neck in a lot of different ways. And if you're talking about aesthetics and wear and, shrinkage stress and all of the different modalities that you can apply it and when it works and when it doesn't work. And when you look at materials, materials need to set themselves apart in my book, and they need to set themselves apart in a significant enough way to where I will go and reach for them and I will use them in a certain situation. So when I'm looking at even where I was when I was in dental school till now, right? Materials have gotten even that much better. The big advent, I guess, from my time from leaving dental school till now was these kind of universal composites that people always talk about, but universally shaded composites. really kind of started with Omnichroma by Tokiyama, and now a lot more companies are adopting that technology because of how successful it is. And that's a wonderful component. Now everyone has something similar or in the same line, and now how do we set ourselves apart, right? Or how do like clinicians set themselves apart in terms of what they offer, right? Some people don't care, right? They will go to anyone down the street because your insurance covers it and that's just fine. Other people will seek you out for other reasons. You know, they feel comfortable in your office. Other people will say, I need the most technologically advanced thing all the time. And in my book, right, I want to use it beyond just providing a good service to my patients and having good relationships with them is providing the best materials possible. And with that comes really bioactivity and me using that as part of my armamentarium that I use every day. And so, you know, Michael mentioned bulk flow and I was kind of working with him for a while on that, kind of talking about positives and negatives and things like that in terms of what I would want in a thing because he was asking me questions about it. And then, you know, from that evolved into kind of the development of this bulk flow, and I've been loving using it, right? I use Activa Restorative, one of their flagship products, their first one, and then I even use bulk flow now. I use them for different reasons in different situations, but I know why. I'm not a one composite one guy. I'm like I've got like 10 in my operatory. I'm being, you know, facetious there.
Yeah.
I have a few select ones that I use, but certainly I have ones that make a difference.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. That's why I want to ask the additional question about patients and where they are. I'm glad that you mentioned that because I do feel like as time goes on and there's more information out there and there's more of this connection between the oral systemic link, I just feel like we're going to have patients that are even more curious about what is being used in their mouth, right, on the restorations and things like that. So I love that approach, Neville, which is, hey, you know, let's use great materials so that, you know, if and when that time comes, even now where patients have that question, like you have that confidence to know that you're doing that, which is great. So Michael, I know that you mentioned a little bit more about the other bioactive products. Anything else that you all have that's exciting at Pulpdent that you want to take this opportunity to share?
It's a good question because I've been wanting to ask you a little bit. One thing we have been thinking about, we continue to think about is all of the product developments, innovations, and the features and benefits for the patient, right? But like Neville's here, is a fantastic clinician and friend of mine. We don't forget about the clinician, really. So in some ways, I think about developing products that doesn't compromise on those aspects. For example, technique sensitivity. A lot of companies are thinking about how do you create the next amalgam replacement, and because in many ways, the composites are not. They're kind of a whole different thing driven by, I would say, more patient demand for aesthetics. Dentistry has changed a lot. So I would say, I still have amalgam in my mouth from when I was a kid, and it's great. I think I hope to keep it forever until it maybe cracks or whatever. But things like that, it makes me really curious. Like, there's other things I'm sure that are in demand in dentistry, not just bioactive, and we have to be paying attention to that, right? And making sure that we're making products that Neville's going to want to love to use, not just because it's better for his patients, but it's going to be easier for him and less technique sensitive, maybe improve chair time, improve the inventory and complexity, and help with his practices profitability. And I think all of those are really important so that we're a good partner in dentistry to everybody involved. So I'm curious. I would love to know. Like I haven't been able to listen to all of your podcasts, but if you had, based on all your experience interviewing all of your guests and hosts, if you've seen something that you think that we should really be paying a little bit more attention to as well.
Neville, I don't know if that question's for you or for me. But
Either of you.
yeah, yeah. Well, here's what I'll say. Then I do think there's a part of that obviously Neville can certainly answer. What I think is encouraging is that, and I do say this all the time, Michael, as someone that interviews, has interviewed thousands of people in dentistry, is that it's a very valuable relationship between the dental practice and the dental manufacturer, right? It's very unique, unlike a lot of other industries. And this is a great example where you have like just that question, you have clinicians like Neville that are using products and the materials evolve, and then you all can go back to the laboratory and you can take that feedback and you can bring something back out to them, and then they can use it and they can give you more feedback. And it does feel like to me, and I think this is where I'll kind of take it next with Neville, that over the years that window is closing even more, which is a great bridge between clinicians and manufacturer, because when both of you work together, ultimately the patients do get the benefit of that. But I think that's a lot that patients don't understand of what goes on behind the scenes, is this relationship between company and clinician. And I think it's exciting. I mean, we're seeing it in the world of AI, just the speed of being able to get that information back. But in the case like this, a materials company in Pulpdent, I think that's always been something that's been very valuable. So now I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but it's definitely something that is unique in dentistry.
Yeah, I
Totally
think
agree.
it's an open-ended answer, I guess I'd call it, in terms of how I'd respond to Michael's question, in that when you're looking to pay attention to what's coming and everything like that, I think it should be more asked a question of what's the problem, right? What's a problem that we clinicians face? What's a problem that our patients present with? And how can we as clinicians, but also dental manufacturers, kind of solve those problems? So things like, resin-based sealers for endodontics used to be the thing forever and ever and ever, right? And then all of a sudden bioceramics came around and oh my God, it just changed the whole way of things doing things. And it's like, now I don't need to do warm vertical anymore. I
Yep.
can do
Yep.
single cone obturation, and it's going to expand in the canal rather than contract like the resin sealer does. And this is all the things we do with MTA now, where MTA used to take 6 hours to set, and now MTA variations will set much more quickly. And those are all things that have come because people, when these dental manufacturers or clinicians come out and invent something, they sometimes have issues with them, right? And that's just the evolution of dentistry in general. Because if you talk to any dentist that is, at retirement age now, and they'll go back and they'll tell you, look, I was doing gold foils and setting denture teeth and doing all this crazy stuff. And now it's like, yeah, man, I just 3D printed some denture teeth and I just made a denture for my guy in like a day. What are you doing? It comes from a problem, and those
Yeah.
problems that are being solved nowadays are just amazing. So when we're looking for things to look forward to, it's looking to solve problems that we as clinicians have and our patients are experiencing. So implant failures and what that means, implant dentistry has gone off the rails in terms of all the super intelligent people that are researching about it and figuring out what works and doesn't work, and then how we can, give people teeth back now where we weren't able to give people teeth before, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
These are all things that I feel like, you know, everyone in the dental industry should pay attention to, because even the simplest thing, I was at a CE course recently with Dr. Pei Ray, who's an awesome clinician. He's out in Tennessee, in Nashville, who does a lot of all in X type of surgery, and he came up with this instrument because he had a problem, right? He's like, I want to measure my osteotomy and how deep I'm drilling, and I need a probe that when I put it up there, it's not going to perforate into my sinus, or I'm not going to accidentally damage the inferior alveolar nerve, and he just came up with this, and to me, I'm like, man, I wish I've had that several times and I didn't even think about it, right? But it takes
Yeah.
people like that to see those problems come up enough that they really need to innovate. And I think that's the thing that I think, again, people should pay attention to. What problem can we solve?
Yeah, and Michael, I'll add one more thing to that on the heels of Neville's comment, and that is, I feel like dentistry in the early days, however we want to say early was, right? We could mean a lot of different generations, but was always more of a reactive type of profession, right? Patients came in to get their teeth clean and when they are in pain. And now I feel like there is more demand, or there's going to be more demand. I feel like patients are being looked at like consumers. They're still patients, but I only say that in the context, Neville, of the things that they're going to want to come in and get done, or some of those things. And I almost kind of think from that, as well as the patient evolves, as the patient takes more care and commitment of their oral health. Like I see a world moving forward where they start to come in and having conversations with Neville and say, "Hey, what about this? And could we do this?" And all of that, and then that goes upstream to like the team at Pulpdent. So I think that's another exciting thing is that we're starting to see is that patients are more involved in the oral health, and I think that can only mean things. And then to your point, Neville, problems will arise, and those problems will need to be solved. So I think we don't know exactly what that looks like, but it's encouraging, I think, for the future of dentistry that patients hopefully are a little bit more involved in their oral health.
Yeah, I mean, I think the really abundance of, AI kind of coming to the form of ChatGPT or Claude or what have you has been really interesting because it, like you said, it brings patients who are more informed to the dental practice, which is both good and bad because
Yeah.
sometimes they don't understand the intric, intricacies,
Intricacies. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
intricacies. Thank you.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, of dentistry and what goes into the thought process for things, right? And you as a clinician or and people in general as a clinician can only provide a service based off of their experiences, right? If you've never, done a zygomatic implant on someone, it's not like you can always talk about it or recognize that a patient might benefit from something like that. So and patients themselves only see what Google says. They're like, oh, I get teeth in a day. I'm like, okay, well, teeth in a day can mean a whole lot of things, right?
Yeah.
People want immediacy in things nowadays, which I get, right? But if you lose a tooth, sometimes you got to wait a little bit. You got to be a little bit more patient. So, I've one day, like you said, maybe there's going to be a problem that's solved and everyone's going to get teeth in a day and we're going to regrow teeth from a study that's done in Japan, right? Or something crazy like that. And that's an exciting thing. But
Yeah.
it makes our jobs as manufacturers and suppliers and dentists and everything like that a little bit more challenging because there's immediacy in everything. And the dentists are going to also want everything they have immediately. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Listening to you,
Michael,
Neville,
it's
I feel like you're gonna become like an implantologist soon. Are you saving that one up?
yeah, no, I'm dabbling. I'm dabbling. I do dental implants in my practice and everything like that, and it's an interesting field where I'm looking to expand my horizons a bit more. I don't think I'll start putting implants in everyone's jawbones, but at least recognizing when patients need it and how I can be of service is big for me. So
so Michael,
No,
maybe
that's
the answer
cool.
is
Yeah.
you're the bench player and you're just waiting, right, for the Nevilles of the world to kind of, hey, let's go. We need this. This is kind of where it's going, and then companies like Pulpdent are ready to go, which
Yeah.
which is
Well,
which is awesome.
we have to do that for sure, but we also have to kind of predict in a way and figure this out, which like Neville said, it's AI helps.
Yeah.
New technologies help. Listening to the customer, we spend a lot of time with voice of customer, as we call it. And these little things come up, and it's just, I think, it's the art of picking up on what you may, it may not seem like a big thing, but could be a big thing.
Yeah.
And dentistry is really hard, and the more I learn, and listening to Neville learn more about implantology, and I don't even want to get there right now because that seems like a way too
Another
complex for
episode.
me at the moment.
that's
But
that's Pandora's
yeah, for
box.
sure.
Yeah. Another
Exactly.
episode.
And just the more you learn, and the more I realize like how difficult dentist jobs really are, and it's just incredible that what they do in their everyday life. I certainly couldn't do it, and so I think it's just an amazing thing that dentists and clinicians like Neville, the service they provide, the health, as healthcare providers, and providing that level of care, and still being able to get home to do some power washing for their
That's right.
kids and for their wife is just bravo. But what I did want to point out a little bit is, um, with the patient aspect and the health aspect, I do think that yes, we are definitely more conscious. I think as a population, especially in North America, we're living longer, we're thinking more about our health, we're all aging, and it makes me wonder, right? Like, should we be doing more patient-centric education? Should we be more inclined to develop products that are, maybe for the older audience, for people who are over 50, 60, 70, who are, they want that quality of life well into their golden age. So just little things like that, and just kind of what you
Yeah.
guys have mentioned.
Yeah, education is always a big thing. Again, I think part of it's happening, like Neville said, it's just by nature on the technology side of just people asking questions, more things that are out there. I think the material conversation is very interesting because of just people's awareness of all kinds of materials and what goes into our body. I mean, I think that in itself is a whole other episode that we could definitely get into. But a lot of exciting things, and I want to thank the both of you. Again, these are the types of conversations I know that the team at Dental City wanted to have. Always great when we can have a clinician like Neville, and of course. Michael, you representing Pulpdent. It's been great to have the both of you. So, any final thoughts as we wrap?
Well, thanks for having us. I think it was a fun little conversation. I feel like I could go on and on about all sorts of things in dentistry. I like to nerd out about dentistry, so I feel like I got the right profession under my belt. So, and it's always, great in meeting and speaking with individuals like yourself, and then obviously, Michael being a good friend of mine, just being able to chit chat about all sorts of things that are going on day to day. So,
Yep. Awesome. Well, Michael, maybe we do a part two, right? Like, let's go back to the drawing board. We could kind of have a part two of this episode of Beyond the Operatory with you and Neville, and we can get on some other stuff because this is for dental
For
practices.
sure.
So odds are that the people that are watch this, they like it as much as we do. So want to thank the both of you again. Love to have you subscribe to Beyond the Operatory, whether you listen to your podcast on Spotify or Apple. Download and follow, and then same thing on YouTube. So the Dental City team really appreciates all that you guys do in your dental practices every day, as well as Michael, the work that you guys do at Pulpdent. So until next time, we hope everybody has a great weekend, and we'll see you soon.
thanks so much.
Thanks, John.
Yep.
You too.